I appreciate Dr. Hasnan Shirazi's efforts to set up this group where there are many possibilities of collaboration, possible research collaborations with one another, and at the same time, we can learn from one another about several different areas of research. Today's talk is generic and it is aimed at MS and PhD students and early career researchers, and that is about how to write a systematic literature review. So writing a systematic literature review would be the things that we will be discussing in coming hour or so. I start with outline and to give you an idea that what are you going to learn from this talk so that you can keep the pace up with what we are talking about and you know what is coming ahead. And in the end, we'll take some questions. So I'll start with some brief history and evolution of guidelines for writing structured literature review. In this section, we'll also discuss what exactly the review articles are. And then some basic concepts which are, or the workflow that is used to write a structured literature review will, from this point onwards, I'll call it SLR. And then the step-by-step guide with some examples and templates will be shared with you. And in the end, we'll have a question answer session. So what are the survey articles? This is important to know and understand. So the survey articles are the ones which aim at presenting a review of a particular domain. So there are many different domains like, for instance, computer science education. We have many articles on blockchain. Now IoT is emerging and coming into full bloom. So there are several different aspects of IoT applications which are being covered these days. So for that matter, what we try to do in the survey articles is that we try to grab the research published in well-reputed venues about a particular topic, and then we compile and synthesize that research for to come up with a single article that effectively is a representation or a summary of the work being done in a given area for say last 10 years. So in this case, we have to read articles very carefully. We have to have a very concentrated and well-defined objectives and idea as to why we are writing this survey, and then we compile and synthesize the results obtained and the methodologies used and possibly the data sets which have been used to conduct those previous studies. And then we write everything in a very formalized manner so that the people can understand the domain very well. So, what is the use of such a survey articles? So, the use of these articles is that the new researchers in the area or even the existing ones, they instead of finding so many articles, they can just read one single article, good survey article, and that can provide them a very comprehensive and interesting overview of the domain. And they can also understand how the domain evolved and what were the developments which were made over the years in a given domain. And in the end, as we conclude the survey, so we get to know that what is the state of the art in different small subdomains of a given area. So this is how we tend to understand or benefit from a survey article. There are different types of survey articles. One are general surveys. The other one is a mapping study or systematic mapping study, we call it. And the last one is systematic literature review. So the general survey article is a general review of a domain by compiling several different articles, as I just mentioned. And the mapping study and systematic literature reviews, they are conducted in a more systematic manner as compared of the general survey. So in these, we have a well-defined, we tend to define well-defined objectives for conducting these studies. And in mapping studies, the idea is to grasp the broader aspects of the domain. So it is more broad and it is based on some bibliometric information, and it covers the breadth of the domain. While the systematic literature reviews are more concentrated, to a given specific area of domain, and it tends to present more details about a given topic. So and this is some high level difference between the types of survey articles. So obviously such articles are very helpful, particularly for PhD students or the MS students who just start understanding what is research. So instead of reading through say 50, 70, or 100 articles of a domain, if at all they find a reasonably good survey article in that area, so that actually suffices for reading 100 articles. So it is very beneficial for early career researchers and PhD students and master students to befriend a particular domain about which the survey article is. So people started to write survey articles, and then slowly, gradually, they thought that there should be some good guidelines about writing the survey articles. So in medical sciences, there are two different important milestones in terms of providing and refining the updates, refining the guidelines for writing survey articles or structured literature reviews. So Quorum was the first one, which they started in 1996 to develop, and then in the end they published their findings in 1999. So Quorum is an acronym of Quality of Reporting of Meta-Analysis. So the meta information that we can find about the articles that is compiled into one single study and is reported for the researchers in a given area. So it is kind of a summary of the articles that we have selected for the study. And these guidelines were then subsequently updated, and and the updates were named as PRISMA statement, which is an acronym of Preferred Reporting Items, Systematic Reviews, and Meta-Analysis. So obviously, in several years, there more or less 10 years, there was a need to revise the guidelines. So these guidelines were revised for medical sciences domain. And may I tell you that these are reasonably generic guidelines, and then they can be equally applicable and easily customizable for the rest of the domains as well. Particularly if we talk about the software engineering or information technology domain, so we had these guidelines which were presented in 2007 by some researchers from the United Kingdom, and then in 2007 they presented their first set of guidelines, and subsequently in 2015 people from Sweden, BTH Sweden, they revised these guidelines for writing structured literature review. So what I have tried to compile in this talk is to come up with more generic and understandable and easy to understand version of these guidelines, and I hope it will be very beneficial for you to understand the concept, the idea, and how to go about it practically to compile and write and manage to publish a good structured a systematic literature review. So here I would like to say one important thing, and that is you must have understood by now that there are two types of study. One is known as primary study, and the other one is the secondary study. So the primary studies are the ones in which we have a proper research problem and we try to solve that problem. Whereas in case of the secondary study, we have these surveys. All types of surveys are considered as secondary studies because they are synthesized. They are not presenting a new research. Rather, they are compiling everything out there in a particular area, and based on the meta information and the technical information available in those articles. The most important thing is how to synthesize that already conducted research into a useful flow that makes the new researchers understand and befriend a given area of research. So the process of conducting an SLR comprises of three main steps: planning, conducting, and reporting. So in planning, we have to have a good motivation and objectives to conduct an SLR. For instance, we it's very important to find whether we already have a given SLR in the area that we are going to cover. So instead of writing a new SLR in that area, it is reasonably good to go through the previous SLR. When we need to find what if people have already started or managed to publish some good reviews in a given area, then we don't need to go for it. So the first check is that we need to find whether or not we need an SLR or not. Secondly, even if there is an SLR, there could be some subdomains or important perspectives that are still unaddressed in that SLR, so we can target those particular areas or sub areas in our SLR. And thirdly, the timeliness is also an important factor that maybe the previous SLR was published 5 years ago or 7 years ago. So now the state of knowledge has improved quite a lot. So there is again a need to write a newer SLR which effectively covers the research carried out in last few years, which the previous one does not cover. So once we have those research objectives and motivations with us, and we are sure that yes, there is need for conducting this SLR, then we establish a review protocol based on the guidelines, which I'll let you know in a while. And then what we do is we start conducting the SLR. And in the conduction process, we started by finding some good articles in a very systematic manner, and then we tend to select those appropriate articles which fulfill our objectives and which are aligned with what we want to present in a given article. And one very important perspective is to make sure that we have chosen a high quality research to compile the survey. So that is very, very pertinent in right. It is one of the most important factors, I must say, in compiling the survey. So if in colloquial terms, I can say if there is garbage in, then there will be garbage out. So I don't want to say that I don't want to be very critical on that. Obviously, people tend to work very well, but still we have some high quality venues and moderate quality venues for research publication. So what we intend to do in this part is quality assessment part, that we try to figure out articles which have been published in good venues, and there are mechanisms for that as well. We'll see in coming slides. And eventually, once we have selected a reasonably good set of articles, then we extract data from them. And once we have extracted data, then we come to stage 3, which is reporting, and we start synthesizing the information that we have achieved from or extracted from the previous research. We start writing about results. We start writing about the approaches that people have used, how they have evaluated them, if at all there are some evaluation measures. And then we also discuss the evolution of research in a given area, and essentially by compiling so many different aspects of research or problems being studied in a given area, we tend to find a taxonomy or a hierarchical setting or types and subtypes of research being conducted in a given area, and we tend to report them in a very appropriate manner so that the researchers who are reading that systematic literature review, they should be able to grasp the overall distribution of research and the main and subdomain concepts which are being exploited or worked on in a given area. Let's start with the planning part. So in planning, we select the domain, we set up objectives, and we formulate research questions. And obviously, I have already mentioned that we need to assure that there is a need for writing such surveys and such a survey which we are aiming for, and there is no existing survey already published with good quality outcomes. So if everything is clear and we are good to go, then we do these 3 things. We select a domain, we set up objectives, and we formulate research questions. Objectives and motivations are hidden are actually materialized by formulating the research questions. So As I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, that I'll explain everything with examples. This is an excerpt from a research article which has been published on the role of IoT in agriculture, and it provides the systematic literature review of this area. So we have these 7 questions, and every question has a motivation associated with it. So what are the target primary publication channels? This question is related to the meta information, that where this research is being published. How has the frequency of approaches been changed related to IoT agriculture over time? So the number of articles which are being produced in this area in good quality research venues, it's again very important, as we can see that in recent years, last 5 to 7 years, there is a growing trend in setting up solutions using IoT in several different domains. So agriculture is again one of those areas which are being influenced by the developments in IoT. So that's the idea for this research question. What approaches are used to address problems related to IoT agriculture? So we are trying to find out the approaches that people have used to solve different problems of agriculture. So essentially, when I see this article, so there are several different subdomains of agriculture as well. So maintaining the field is one of them. So greenhouse is yet another possibility and subdomain in this area. And again, the cattle farming also falls under this broader umbrella of agriculture. So see this question, that what are the main application domains? So that actually helps us understanding several different perspectives of agricultural domain, which are being say handled with the help of IoT. So maybe cattle's mobility is one thing. The water supply in fields is yet another perspective. So there are many different things or sub areas of research which are being solved. The problems related to them are being solved by the researchers. And then question number 5 is the primary focus of the selected studies, the types of IoT devices and sensors which are being used in different areas. And obviously this cannot work without networks or communication. Actually, developments in networks has actually given rise to the importance of has influenced the importance of this IoT domain, because of this wireless technologies and mobile applications and sensors and the network protocols for wireless communication. They have actually influenced the developments in this area, which we can see in different fields. So we take yet another example here, and this is from a different area. So it is blended learning model for introductory programming course. This article was published in PLOS One journal. Here we can see different research questions, and it is about blended learning and for introductory programming courses. So again, this article says that what are different blended learning approaches which have been successfully used to teach introductory programming courses, which has always been a challenge for all kinds of schools, be it a very high tech school or a moderate school anywhere in the world. So this is a common problem for everyone, that people or students take time to understand and be comfortable with the programming domain. So blended learning was the focus. So what are different blended learning models that have been applied? This is the first thing. And how effective is blended learning? So finding the models is first question, their effectiveness is the second question, and out of those models, after reviewing so many different approaches for blended learning for computer programming, computer programming, which ones or which one does the authors of this do the authors of this article they think that seems to be the best choice. So these are the 3 research questions which obviously have associated objectives and motivations for conducting this SLR. So the next thing is general consideration for writing good research questions. So once we have this planning part, so we have already seen a couple of examples, and with these examples, we are pretty comfortable with the types of questions that are there. So let me give you some good general guidelines about writing good research questions with reasonable objectives and motivations. So they should be addressing the scope of the studies. Like here we have only blended learning and those blended learning approaches which are, say, targeting introductory programming courses only. So this is the scope. We have to have the scope of the study. And the publication rating of the study is good quality research. How is it being published and with what rate and with what speed and with what magnitude it is being published in good venues. Some we need to think about the main features and benefits of those studies, the types of problems that are being addressed, and how these approaches have evolved over the years. Because generally the SLRs, they tend to cover at least 5 years research being carried out in a given area, and what are the exciting problems which have already been solved and partly solved, and what are the new future directions, and what are the best solutions, as we just saw in this second example, that which model is the most appropriate for introductory programming courses. This is the best solutions that we try to propose from our perspective and understanding after reading so many articles. So these are some sample questions that can help you formulate your structured literature review in a given area. They have been presented in reasonably generic manner so that down the line when you try to customize them for your SLRs, it shouldn't be a problem. So the question number one is focuses on the scope of the studies. The second question discusses distribution of the research work over the years. The third question handles different features or main approaches which have been used. The fourth question actually looks forward to the need to identify the most commonly used evaluation methods or measures or data sets for that matter. And the fifth question and sixth question, they are related to finding new problems, and they tend to give a way forward for the researchers. And again, I would reiterate and emphasize this part at least. Question 5 and 6, when we reach this part, so the early career researchers and the PhD students have to go through this part very carefully, and this can give them some possibilities for coming up with their research questions for their studies, for MS thesis or PhD research. So this is very important. There is a very general comment which I have been listening to for so many years, and that is, the PhD student or the MS student says that I started working in an area and it was already occupied. This actually reflects that the student has not been able to understand the delicacies of defining the problems, the research problems. So in this part of the survey article, you will be able to find the way forward, the high level way forward for several different sub areas which have been discussed in a given selected domain which the SLR covers. So for instance, if at all, there is a need to devise new data sets. So that is pretty much a pointer to figure out that yes, I can work on developing new data set, for instance. So if at all there is a need to develop, say, certain, there is no solution to a given subdomain, or very few solutions in a given subdomain. For example, in IoT agriculture, if we say that there are very few solutions to the greenhouse technology, for instance, so we can target that subdomain and see what has been there through this SLR and figure out that okay, yes, I can target this area and figure out that what possible contributions I can make. So again, that's important to understand here. So coming to the second phase, that is conducting the SLR. So it again, here we have, after defining the objectives and questions, we have to have a very systematic method to select good quality research work. That's the idea of the second phase. So as I told you that through those guidelines which have been published, I would like to present some excerpts, important portions of those guidelines. to you so that you are able to follow the footsteps of what have been recommended practices in this particular step of conducting an SLR. So let's go through the diagram on the left first. So it's a flowchart of finding how to find suitable articles. So we choose digital libraries, and the set of digital libraries are given here below: IEEE Explore, Springer, Science Direct, Web of Science, Google Scholar, etc. So then, after selecting those digital libraries, we set up search strings related to the area which we are targeting, and then we execute those search queries on all these different portals, and they help us finding relevant research articles. So after getting those articles, we have to have a well-defined inclusion and exclusion criteria for selecting an article or excluding an article from the survey. So based on that, our inclusion criteria, we see that if at all that article conforms to our criteria, then we select that paper. Otherwise, we exclude that article. And then after the articles which we have selected, we again review them in detail. So there are different levels of granularity that we or granularity checks that we apply to select an article, and then we in the end review those final versions of those articles, detailed versions of those articles, abstract and full text, and if we find them suitable, then we use them for our study and synthesize out of them, and otherwise we at this stage again we can exclude the articles after having detailed review of the article that it does not seem to be suitable because the previous stages were high level understanding or quick review of the article, not the detailed review of the article. So this is how we select the articles. So this portion can also be divided into four different, from the diagram on the right, we can see that identification, screening, eligibility, and inclusion of the article. So again, we search through the databases and other possible venues as well, if required. And then we remove the duplicate articles when we try to find articles from Google Scholar and IEEE Explore and all that. So there is a possibility that we have duplicate articles. We remove the duplicates. Then in the screening, we see just the title and abstract, and then we see the full articles and exclude articles which are not suitable for our research, and the ones that are carried forward, we perform their qualitative analysis whether they are good enough and published at high quality venues, and they have substantial useful information that can help synthesizing the research in a given area. Then we take them to the final selected articles, otherwise we can exclude them at this stage as well. Again, the example which will help you understanding what I was trying to explain in the previous slide. So from the blended learning article that we have adopted as a case study in this talk, so these are different libraries or the portals, research portals which had been used for extracting the articles. And you see these programming, blended learning, or blended course, or blended classroom. These are the keywords for hybrid learning, etc., which have been used, and we use these conjunctions and disjunctions and wildcard searches at times to find out the articles, and every different portal has different exposition of searching the same thing. So you see here, Science Direct, it says title, abstract, keywords should contain programming and blended learning and all that. So there are several different smarter ways of finding articles in different portals which they have exposed. So we need to be expert in that as well. And there are appropriate guidelines for each portal so that we can find appropriate, we can formulate good quality search queries by using appropriate keywords and using these conjunctions and disjunctions, so that we should be able to, to extract the useful information only and minimize the noise or unwanted data. And at the same time, we don't want to lose any useful research articles as well. So this is how we go about it. And again, in this article, if we see, so those general guidelines which we just saw in the form of two different workflow and as a diagram. So let's see how was this carried out in this article. So it extracted information by putting those search queries, and you see that 1715 articles were found from these different portals. And duplicate, we found that there are 41 duplicate articles. So we excluded those 41, and it turned out to be 1674 articles after the initial identification. And then we enter into the screening step. In screening step, we see just the title and abstract and keywords maybe of the articles, and we see that which ones seem to be relevant and fall in the scope of what we are trying to achieve or what we have set for this particular study. So again, at this stage, many different articles were excluded. This is the step where most of the articles are excluded, because we just see as you go along, you will be able to understand that by just reading the abstract and title, you are able to quickly grasp what is being presented in this article. So with that, you see 1598 articles have been excluded, and we are just left with 76 articles after this. And then you can very well imagine that we cannot go through 60 more than 1500 articles full-fledged. So what we do is we have already excluded many articles, and now we are just left with 76 articles. So here is the time that we go for full text assessment. So after assessing the full text, we figured out that we there are some more articles which need to be excluded, and we are left, actually, in this case, half of the articles have been excluded and the rest of the half have been included in the study. So this is how we have selected the articles. And on the right hand side, you can just see that there are reasons for exclusion. You just don't see that, okay, these many numbers of articles have been excluded. So how many articles were excluded for what reason is again important and being presented here. So you see duplication, no higher education, because the focus of the study, again, the scope of the work was only on higher education. So the ones which were aiming at school education, maybe, or college education, they have been excluded. So 51 were those do not have proper blended online and face-to-face components. So we were enforcing that we'll only consider the articles which are blended, and we have defined what blended means, that online and face-to-face components should be there. So 31 of them did not have were claiming to be blended learning approach, but they did not have this definition that we opted for this particular study. So we are excluding them, and the focus is not discussing a blended approach. So they somehow, with the help of keywords, they were just shortlisted. But when we just saw their abstract and title, we figured out that they were not focusing on the blended learning approaches. So 1516, a very big number, falls into this category. And again, at this last step, we can see that the 38 articles which were excluded do not have proper blended learning online face-to-face components. We still thought that after reading the title and abstract that they fall into this category, but once we get into the details, the rest of the details of the article, we figured out that 13 articles are not appropriate for selection. And lastly, focus is not discussing a blended approach. So these are 25 articles fell in this category, and we excluded them. So again, for the role of IIT agriculture paper that we are considering for this study for the discussion. So again, these are the portals and these are the keywords which have been used. And here, keyword, title, duplication, removal, and abstract and full text, we can see that how many articles were left after different steps of screening, and eventually we selected 67 articles out of 3,179 and excluded the rest. So you can use any of these two different variants, and even there are several other variants you'll find in different research articles, SLRs, with which people have presented their screening process. As a matter of fact, explicitly write it in our SLR that what are the inclusion and exclusion criteria for selecting and disregarding an article for our study. So the points that we discussed before, that the scope and higher education, both blended learning, the definition of blended learning, that face-to-face and online have to be there. And in this case, for the PLOS One article, the researches were not limited by publication date. In some cases, we say that we are just focusing on the articles that have been published after 2014, say for that matter. So if at all any article has been published before that publication date, so that is excluded from the study, and the ones which are in fall in the bracket of the timeline, we may include them. And again, the articles which are not written in English and there are several different possibilities which fall into the exclusion criteria are non-higher education articles, for example, up till K-12. Not discussing the blended learning approach as we define the blended learning. They do not conform to our criteria. These are the exclusion criteria. Then comes the quality assessment. Again, I said that it is very, very important. So let me emphasize on it once again with the help of an example. Again, in this blended learning work, what they did was that the author proposed that there is a well-defined criteria that these are the 5 things that an article should have. So if article has these 5 things in an acceptable mode, at least 3 of them, then it can be considered. Otherwise, it will not be considered. So it has a measured outcome that how did it measure the work done, and it presents a background and literature review with proper detail. So if it is reasonably detailed, we give it a score. If it is very limited, we do not give it a score. And there, the sample is well described or poorly described. How did it carry out the study? Like since it is blended learning approach, so sample size and all the students which were involved, the student group, control group, and other group. So if that is well defined and described, so it's okay. Otherwise, if it is poorly described, so we cannot generalize such studies, so we disregard it. Study design methodology has to be clear, otherwise we disregard it, and there have to be proper conclusions derived with appropriate well-defined scientific methods and measures. So we include it, otherwise we exclude it. Then based on this, we have 5 different criteria, and it sums up to 5, 1 score for each. So if at all an article has score greater than or equal to 4, we call it a high quality article. If the score is 3, we call it moderate. Otherwise, with 2 or lesser score, we call it low scoring article. This is how we tend to rate. And there are other ways of rating the articles as well, which have some overlapping possibilities. So for IoT agriculture article, the journal and conference rankings were considered as the rating criteria with an implicit idea that a good quality venue only allows good quality research, or well-reputed research is published in top quality venues. So the journal rankings based on Scopus, they were considered Q quartiles that the SJR has defined Q1, 2, 3, and 4. So if an article has been published in Q1 ranking, in case of being a journal article, is given good score. Q2 is given 1.5, Q3 or 4 is given 1, and if it's this year ranking is not there, so it is, or Scopus ranking is 0, so we give it a 0 score. Again, for conferences, core A star and core A star is given 2, core A is given 1.5, B is given 1, C is given 0.5, and if it is not in core ranking, so we do not give it any score. So based on the venues, and then if again the quality assessment says it presents a clear solution in the field of agriculture, so we give it 1 point, otherwise partially 0.5 or no. How many citations this article has is yet another indirect measure to figure out the quality of the work. And the C part is explained through this table already. So in order to find the quality of the journal, or the quartile of a journal, this is the website provided by Scopus. So I have provided this website, and you can just go and write the name of the journal, like PLOS One or Information Retrieval, and you can see PLOS One falls is a multidisciplinary journal, and it is Q1 in first quartile, and information retrieval is an information systems domain journal, and it falls in Q2 second quartile, so slightly lesser quality. Uh, but obviously, I mean, these are good journals. And in terms of conferences, we have this core ranking, computing research and education conferences. So being like rated for several years. So we just write the name of a conference, very large databases, which is one of the top most conferences in the area. So you can just see A star over here. So international conference, very large databases. So portal.co.edu.au, this is the website, and you can just go and write the name of the conference and find it out the category. So with this category and with this quartiles, you can, I just made it easier for you through this slide that you should be able to find the ratings of conferences or journals very easily. Now is the time to extract the data. The last step after selecting appropriate articles, after searching and discarding several articles and ensuring that we have high quality articles in the end which fall in the scope of the work. So these are two different perspectives of extracting the information from the article. One is related to the meta information, and the second is about the technical information. So again, we need to conduct this step very, very carefully to make it sure that we come up with a very comprehensive and detailed summary of the articles that we have selected for this study. So we need to have the research questions in our mind. And this meta information is pretty simple. The title, publication venue, year of the publication, quality ranking for journals and conferences, number of citations, and citation string, which will help us in while writing the article, so that we have, if you are using LaTeX, so you have to have that BibTeX or otherwise citation string in general. So these things help us in compiling the information in a more meaningful way. The research questions that we formulated should be kept in mind while extracting the technical information from the article. So I emphasize here that we need to know the domain and subdomain of the articles. This actually helps us defining or categorizing the research that we have selected. For instance, we have selected 70 articles. So what was the domain? So in case of IoT, use of IoT in agriculture, we'll not say that IoT is the domain and agriculture is the subdomain. That is already being reflected in the title, and we have already found articles based on that. So which domain of the agriculture does it focus? For example, cattle farming. And subdomain is maybe the movement of cattle is being monitored. So cattle movement monitoring, and the domain is cattle farming. So we have to drill it down to yet a deeper level and another deeper level to figure this out. This actually helps us in finding different application areas which are being influenced or being researched in a given broader umbrella, and this actually helps us formulating a taxonomy of the research being done in a given area. So the problem addressed in a given area, primary study, that we need to write that which problem was addressed, what type of solution was proposed, and what were the results that we achieved in that study, the operating parameters and the evaluation measures. I'll explain it with the help of example instead of explaining it here. And the dataset which were used to evaluate the results or to perform the experimentation. And another important perspective is the analysis part. At times there are articles which just explain the numbers that, okay, we managed to achieve 78% accuracy, right? And our competitor could only achieve 68% accuracy. So why was your approach better than the previous approach, the benchmark approach? So that analysis part is again very important, and if at all it is given in that primary study, then we should note it down. And this is something which I would again emphasize that for new researchers, the future directions are very, very important, and they tend to help us once we compile them and synthesize them based on these subdomains and domains. and the types of solutions which are being proposed for different subdomains. So they help us in defining the way forward for the researchers after compiling the study. This is an example of what we technical perspectives that we might look forward to. So the domain could be cattle farming and subdomain could be cattle tracking. The domain could be quality coding standards and the subdomain could be that the article just considers the usage of comments for enhancing the quality of code. The domain could be rank joins, and the subdomain could be the web-based data sources only, not the system resident data sources. So this is how we tend to define the domain and subdomain. And the problem addressed is the refined problem that we are addressing. The proposed solution is there, and these are the operating parameters. This is an excerpt from an article which helps us understanding the concept of operating parameters. These are the influencing factors which, based on which we tend to evaluate our proposed solution. So, for instance, for a join problem, in the database systems, the rank joins or simple joins. The scoring distribution for rank joins is important, or data distribution. Then join selectivity of a join, the number of results that we need to achieve in this rank join, then is the case, the number that we are only interested in top 100, 200, or 500 results. The number of tuples or the size of the data in 2 or 3 tables which are involved, and in the probabilistic approaches, the threshold probability. So the type of solution which is proposed, actually this proposed solution helps us in identifying the possible parameters which whose variations can influence the results of the approach. So these are several different parameters which can influence the outcome of the proposed approach. So we in order to make it exhaustive evaluation the approach, we set up several different values for these different operating parameters to perform experimentation for a rigorous analysis. And you see these bold ones are the default values that once we are varying, say, the number of results, then the rest of the parameters, they will be set to the bold ones, so that we are just changing this number only 100, 200, and 500. The rest one will be uniform 0.01, 10,000, 0.9. So this is how we tend to use operating parameters in our primary study. So once we have such parameters over there, we have very detailed experimentation based on these. They help us uh, formulating a variety of experiments to figure out the effect of different operating parameters. And then we have evaluation measures like time, IO calls, and in terms of, and for classification problems, we have accuracy, precision, and F measures. And for different, say, computer science education, in computer science education domain, we have statistical tests for validation like t-test and ANOVA, and by the factors that we achieve, that whether or not the proposed approach was influential enough on the control group that they performed better or not. So for data extraction, again, for the for the students who are very new to this area, let me tell you that data extraction involves reading the abstract introduction and the methods, evaluation results, and then we come to the discussion part. Personally, I think that when you are new to research, you should read the introduction very carefully. Good articles present the motivation of the research and the main contributions of the research and the approach which has been used in the introduction in very simplified manner. Because in introduction, we do not go too much into the technical details of what we are doing. So at a very high level, we define the motivation and importance of the work being done and why is it important, and we tend to establish that it is an important research problem which has not been addressed so far, and then we tell how uh, we actually solved it and what are our major contributions, and it also tells the flow of the rest of the articles in the end. So that helps us grasping the overall concept and what is available in which section. So I would encourage all the new researchers to read the introductions very carefully. And this will actually help you writing your introductions in very sophisticated manner as well. And then the methodology and the results, as I explained in the previous slide, with the help of operating parameters and evaluation measures. And then the discussion that what is the scope and or limitation of the work. For example, in web-based sources, it is only a solution that is applicable on the web-based systems where the data sources are web-based, not for the disk resident data for that matter. So we need to identify the limitations and possible future directions of the work being done. Coming to the last phase, that is reporting or writing or synthesizing the results. So we have this data collection, assessment, and then we pool the data and we finally present the summarized outcome. So I would like to explain it with the help of this excerpt from the paper. Well, the second research question for the PLOS one article that we were considering for discussion in this study was the effectiveness of the blended learning approaches. So, see, there are this is an excerpt from that article, and we can see three different paragraphs here. So the biggest mistake that people do is while extracting the data from the articles, what we do is we just start writing that okay, this is the approach that the a given article has used. So once that approach is there, we have written it in 2 to 3 lines or 4 lines for that matter. So what students tend to do is they just start writing about one article and yet another article and yet another article in a given subdomain. So that is a disaster. That effectively means that you are just reporting about the what a given primary study has been about or how did it solve the problem. You're not trying to relate the studies together to come up with a very systematic way how these studies are being conducted and how these are related to one another, which one was carried before the other one, which one actually extended the work done by the previous one. So no such thing is being extracted or synthesized out of it. That is the worst way of presenting the synthesis of the data. So it is very important. Again, the domain and subdomain concept that I presented in this slide is very pertinent to play a role over here. So what we do is we compile the articles based on the domains and subdomains, and then we see how things evolved, and we tend to write it in a very systematic manner. So here you can see integrating online components in introductory programming courses, and then integration of face-to-face components with introductory programming courses. And then a balanced mix of online and face-to-face components enables us to do this. So these are three different ideas which are being discussed in three different paragraphs with the help of several different studies which have been categorized into these um, different variants of blended learning. So they are being discussed separately and with their strengths and weaknesses and how these approaches were evolved maybe. So this is very important to, I have given you this written material over here to make you understand that how you need to synthesize about a given area. And then again, once you have synthesized things together, so we have certain meta information and technical information and quality assessments and all that. So once we come to the write up part, then we need to see that how do we need to tabulate and group and cluster, and whether we should present something as a graph or bar graph or pie chart, and different visualizations are very important. Now here the most important part is that the visualization should help you support the reader understand what you are trying to say. It is not only about it has nothing to do with the beautification of the article, that yes, it is looking good. So looking good is one part. Helping you explain the point that you want to make is the real part. So you should be focusing on only on the fact that whether you should present something as a table or in the form of a graph, which visualization will help you make the reader understand it more easily and clearly. And again, if you select a graph, then should it be a pie chart or a line graph or a bar graph? So again, the values in the graph and the point that you want to highlight, which different variant of a visualization is helping you explain your point easily. That is very, very important. So these are different variations that you will see in these. See, for all the articles here, they have this quality score. And here in the pie chart, they have those articles, number of articles published in a given year. So from 2010 to 2018, we have these different distributions of the number of articles published. This is yet another way of presenting the articles that from the close one study, online self-paced, face-to-face instructor-led online collaboration. So these are the number of studies which have been, number of approaches which have been used. So here blended learning models, so flipped, mixed, flex, supplemental and online practicing. So which articles fall into which category? So see, in tabular form or in graphical form or as in the form of pie chart, we have different visualizations which help us explain the reader about the point that we want to make. Again, that domain and subdomain thing can be compiled into a taxonomy as a contribution. This actually helps the reader understand the domain, overall domain. So you see, IoT-based smart farming has IoT agriculture applications, devices and sensors, protocols, and the country policies. These are several different aspects. So in applications, we have livestock, greenhouse, and precision farming, which are again see next level of detail. For IoT agriculture devices, we do not have any next level of detail, right? And for IoT agriculture protocols, so these are the wireless protocols which are being used by the sensors and devices being used in these settings. The articles which we have discussed or considered, they are using these types of protocols. And the policies, which countries have devised the policies, and what policies are there, major points of those policies. This is yet another example of the taxonomy. So for top K processing or join techniques in database systems, so we have query model, query data and query certainty, and then data access, implementation level, and ranking functions. These are 5 different aspects of each and every single approach which is discussed. So this is a very different perspective. So it says that a given approach maybe involves top K joins. In terms of data and query certainty, it has certain data and exact methods. It uses sorted and random access both. Implementation level is query engine level, and ranking function is, say, monotonous. So this is how we can categorize a single primary study using this hierarchy. So it all depends that how useful this taxonomy can be for the readers and the researchers in a given domain. So there are different possibilities of coming up with these taxonomies, which is a hierarchical chart explaining different perspectives of the domain that you have studied after careful deliberations and considering the quality research work published in different venues. So it's very, very pertinent to come up with this taxonomy, and this actually helps the researchers as well. So maybe you are working on top K join model with uncertain scoring functions. So with uncertain scoring functions, top K join models, you only found maybe 3 studies or 5 studies. So this can be one area where you can approach that, okay, there is plenty of room in this area and I want to work or explore this area. Lastly, we have this SLR template. In SLR template, we have this abstract introduction, the method, where we present the research questions, search processes, including criteria, quality assessment, and data collection and analysis. Then we come up with the results or synthesis that we have obtained out of the research article, search results, quality evaluation, and quality factors are discussed. And in the end, we present, sometimes they call it results, sometimes they call it discussion. So the research questions that you have formulated are discussed one after the other. And in the end, we have some future directions and way forward for the researchers, and we conclude it in the end. Okay, due to some technical problem, I was disconnected, but I guess that everybody was with me during the session. I hope so. So, unfortunately, due to this reconnection, I cannot read the comments. So, if you can just copy and paste your questions yet again, so it will be easier for me to address and answer those questions. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, so am I audible? And if at all you have any questions? So before disconnecting, I went through a couple of questions, and one question was that there are different reviews by different types of reviews that you have received after submitting an SLR. So actually, the subjectivity is all around for the review process. Even if you are submitting a primary research where you have worked on a specific problem with evaluation, so people may have different perspectives based on their personal understandings and expertise in that given area where of article they are reviewing. Based on that, you can encounter these different perspectives. Most of the times, such survey articles are not accepted in the first go. This is the general trend. So what you have to do is you have to come up with because somebody else when reads your work and other domain experts, they point out different improvements in the way you have written, or maybe ask you to add more perspectives to what you have done. And at times their comments are mutually exclusive. One reviewer has comments from one area, and the other one has comments from another different sub area. Very few times, very seldom, their comments are conflicting. So in that case, since you are working in that given area and you understand many different things, so you have to, uh, uh, while writing the rebuttal and while improving the article, you have to come up with something very you have to come up with very smart and decent language through which you can answer the reviewers that yes, you have understood their point of view and this is how you have solved the problem. So generally for every while answering the reviews or writing a rebuttal, what you do is you incorporate three things at a time. A single comment from a reviewer, your take on that comment, your feedback or your point of view on that comment, and the third thing is how you have addressed that change in your paper. In what section did you make that particular change, which actually ensures that you have addressed it, so that it should be easy for the reviewer in the second go once you resubmit it, that he can just go and see whether or not you have made the appropriate changes and or required and desired changes in the article. That's how we tend to handle the reviews in this case. And generally such articles are long, so we have, I mean, writing an SLR takes many months, defining the objectives and motivations, and then finding articles, and then extracting information, synthesizing, writing, revisions, so many revisions of the article. and then finally submission and review process and all that. So it takes quite a lot of time to publish one single article. Yes, Ali, Aneeb, you have to respond to each. There are ways to respond. If you think that the comments are similar, then you can mention. Actually, you have to copy paste the comments in your rebuttal file. So if two comments from two reviewers are same, so you can paste them one after the other and say reviewer one said this and reviewer three also said the same thing more or less with different wording. This is how, again, that will be the reviewer's comments. The second thing will be how you have addressed it, right? What is your feedback on this? And the third thing will be what changes have you made in the article? So these three things should be there. So if you cannot just leave it open by writing that, okay, I have resubmitted the article and see the highlighted part and figure out that, yes, I have made all the changes. You have to write a very explainable and understandable rebuttal file. Yes, you can combine the comments of two reviewers together if they are very, very same. And you have one consolidated response file for all the reviewers. You don't make three files for three different reviewers. You have to come up with a single file. So any other questions, please? So Avas is asking whether a research paper can be published in different journals or conferences. Well, Avas, one research work can be published in one venue, number one, and it is unethical to submit it in more than one venue at the same time. For instance, I have written a survey article and I have submitted in Journal 1 and I submit it in Journal 2 at the same time. This is not appropriate. Once it is published, so it is no more novel, and so since it has been published, so if you want to publish another thing, then it has to be new and novel. Yes, some people think that publishing review surveys articles doesn't worth it, perhaps because some strange rewarding criteria from HEC. Well, there are different pointers to ponder upon. Well, one thing is, why are we doing a research work? That is the question. So if you feel that yes, you are working in an area and you have explored so many articles with the help of your student groups, or a group of students is already working on it. So um, the point is that you are doing it for the community, research community, that yes, this is an area which does not have a good survey article and I am going to write it for the people. That should be the aim and objective. So obviously, would you like to write this objectivity that in the end would HEC admire my efforts in terms of rewarding me for this review article? Certainly not. The other thing is that if you manage to publish a good survey article, then the positive side is you tend to get a lot of citations. A good survey article is cited a lot of times, and you get recognition in the research community that this person, yeah, or this group of authors actually came up with this excellent survey on a given domain. So all the people who will be working down the line in that given area or those sub areas, they will they will feel happy to cite your article in their study that okay, we got motivation, or several different in the related work, they'll quote plenty of your findings. So that will actually help you in getting recognition in the scientific community. So it is always a good idea to write such article if you are inclined to do that and you feel like that there is something missing in this given area and a review article should be written over there. So yes, HTC, there are many in terms of rewarding and other perspectives. There are several different questions that are there, and controversial activities are there, which again, I let's not call them controversial. Rather, they are subjective. People understand different things in different ways. So writing surveys is a good idea if at all there is a need to. Okay, so Mubashir has a question about effectively compile the section threats of validity. Yes. I did not include it in my presentation though, but yes, it is very important. Again, the subjectivity prevails over here. So the threats of validity are kind of subjective things that since say I Mubashir and Hasnan, we are compiling some work on for a structured literature review. So our understanding could be different for particularly for social science problems maybe because we are in different settings. Sometimes the generalization of the results seem to be challenging. That the approaches which we have discussed have been say assessed on very small data sets or the social perspective like this blended learning approach somebody proposes it and those approaches have been used in different continents. Different approaches have been used in different continents. So one approach, due to socio-cultural differences, cannot be generalized for the rest of the world as well, that it will be equally good for the rest of the world as well. So these are the kind of things which are threats to validity. And again, finding and selecting the articles is again something which falls into this category that somehow we tend to ensure with our systematic approach that we have covered almost all articles in a given area. Like in the case study that we selected, the blended learning one, in that it considered a particular definition of blended learning. It which is that a course which has an online component as well as a face-to-face component will only consider those articles as blended learning articles. So that again is something very subjective that in that article they have considered this definition of blended learning, whereas there could be some other definitions of blended learning as well, and articles which have been worked out based on some other definition of blended learning, they have been excluded from the review. So again, that falls under the threat of validity that in terms of generalization and validation of this research, whether it will be applicable to or it will be easily generalizable or not. These are the things which fall under the category of threats and validation section. So yes, in the very end, we tend to write threats to validity part where we ourselves expose those possibilities which may hinder the generalization or the quality of work that we have done or wherever we have opted for any subjective or our own criteria, whereas some other criteria also exist for a given task. So these kind of things are discussed in threats to validity, and generally we write it towards the very end, just before the conclusion, that we need to keep these things in mind while reading and understanding this review. So question from Ahad is people argue that where is the contribution in a survey article and it is hard to convince reviewers. Can you please comment on this aspect? How to induce strength? Yes, that is actually the synthesis part which I highlighted very pertinent because you see the first part if I go to this if you remember the presentation, so in that presentation we have last part where we say that okay we are going to define the if you can see the slide where I have SLR template practical workshop outline kind of thing. Here, if you see first three sections are kind of establishing what we are trying to do. Like we have objectives, we have searched articles, and we have made sure that these are the good quality articles. So first three sections are just emphasizing the fact that we are not making it an arbitrary study. The actual contribution which induces novelty and strength into your work falls in section 4. So when I discussed this part, that when you are writing, then in terms of writing, you have to come up with something very, very precise, compiled workflow, which actually explains different perspectives on domains and subdomains of the question that you are asking and that you are trying to address in a study. So this is an example which you can see right now on the screen if it is being shared to you, that there are three different perspectives and each one of them is being presented in different paragraph. And it is, I mean, these papers, paper number 56, 86, 81, and 80 and 69, they have been discussed in other parts of the article as well. But in this part, it is only their effectiveness part in blended learning is being discussed over here, right? So this is about writing your points under the appropriate research questions. This is where people generally tend to struggle, and that actually hinders the reader to understand the true synthesis that you have built after reading so many articles. That's very, very important. Actually, if we just start writing about one article and about yet another article and a third article in different paragraphs, that does not contribute towards any novelty. So the novelty here is lies under the synthesis, number one. And number two is this taxonomy. So if you come up with a taxonomy of a domain, these ones which I showed in the slides as well, again, you are the one who has put things into different perspectives. And now people can understand how this domain, how the research in this area is being conducted in many different sub areas. So that again helps the readers understand it. So the third important thing is the way forward. Again, your subdomains concept, which we tried to highlight while reading the articles, that what is the domain and subdomain given primary study targets. So those domains and subdomains uh, come forward to help you present the way forward in those sub areas of research. So when you compile them again in a very systematic manner and in a very precise, concise way, while relating things with one another and in a very decent and fluent manner, that actually helps you ensuring that yes, you have made a contribution in that area. And again, the introduction part, which generally the new researchers they don't bother much about writing good introductions. In introduction, you have to come up with and you have to write uh, what is the contribution that the research community can or the benefits that the research community can take out of your survey. So sometimes there are existing surveys, then you tend to differentiate that okay, this is how my survey is different from the previous ones, and this is how you should. This is how the new factors come into are presented and discussed in my research. So you have to highlight them very explicitly in the introduction part, so that the reader makes sure that yes, or the reviewer, once he reads through your article, he manages to find those newer and novel contributions while reading through your article. If you do not mention them explicitly in your introduction, then you are putting yourself into a trouble yourself. Don't expect the reviewer to read through the article and then come up with appreciation. Oh yes, I have read through this article, 30 pages, and now I can see that okay, I have extracted that these are the novelties in this work. Why don't you write them in the first place in the introduction? So try to write the novelties and the strengths of your work as compared to the previous studies yourself.